e-textbook. However, the second part of the talk will be more important. How to make a decision when you are confronted with a patient with corrected transposition to decide about the operability. If you look at what is corrected transposition, it's a situation where there is double discordance. That means there is atrioventricular and ventricular arterial discordance. Right atrium connected to left ventricle, left atrium connected to right ventricle. So there is atrioventricular discordance and ventricular arterial discordance. Quite often it is associated with VSD, outflow tract obstruction. Outflow tract obstructions are commonly on the left ventricular outflow tract obstruction or pulmonary stenosis, but rarely it can be subaortic or right ventricular outflow tract obstruction also. And quite often involving rhythm disturbances in two forms. One is a pre-excitation, which is very often a left-sided accessory pathway, or progressive AV nodal disturbances, AV nodal conduction block. It's quite common in the setting of situs solitis with dextrocardia. There will be varying degrees of clinical features. Some of them can be a neonate with severe heart failure. A neonate with severe heart failure means either the child is having a very severe left AV valve regurgitation or a complete heart block with ventricular dysfunction. This is causing a neonatal heart failure. Otherwise, if they have just a ventricular septal defect, they normally escape the first 6 to 8 weeks when the pulmonary vascular resistance is high, and they get into heart failure after 6 to 8 weeks. If they have an associated pulmonary stenosis as well, then the heart failure is significantly delayed. They remain asymptomatic for a long period of time. So the corrected transposition with VSD and pulmonary stenosis is one of the very stable, balanced circulation, which goes on for many years without much of symptoms. There can be a small group of patients who do not have either significant AV valve regurgitation or hemodynamically significant ventricular septal defect, and these patients will have completely an asymptomatic survival into adulthood, and we may be seeing some of the adults with corrected transposition without any cardiac abnormality at all. The complications include tricuspid valve regurgitation, AV nodal disturbances, accessory pathways on the left side, and systemic right ventricular dysfunction. Echocardiographic evaluation starts with identifying the position of the heart, because corrected transposition very often involves mesocardia or dextrocardia in situs solitis. Whenever there is a situs solitis with dextrocardia, a good number of these patients will have a corrected transposition. AV discordance by definition means it's an L-looped ventricle. So what is L-looped ventricle? I just wanted to know, are you seeing the photograph also? Are you seeing my photo also so that I can show something?
Yes, we can see you, sir.
Okay. So one of the questions that will be asked will be, what is an L-looped ventricle and what is a D-looped ventricle? Take always the left ventricle as the main ventricle. If the right ventricle is to the right of the left ventricle, it is D-looped ventricle. And if the right ventricle is on the left side of the ventricle, it is L-looped ventricle. So AV discordance has got an L-looped ventricle where the right ventricle will be on the left side of the main left ventricle. Left AV valve is actually morphologically the tricuspid valve, and abnormalities are extremely common in this condition. In VA discordance, pulmonary artery arises from the right-sided left ventricle and aorta arises from the left-sided right ventricle. Very common to have left and anterior aorta and right and posterior pulmonary artery. This is the commonest great artery relationship in corrected transposition. Very rarely you can have side-by-side great arteries where aorta is on the left side and pulmonary artery is on the right side. And sometimes aorta can be strictly be anterior and pulmonary artery can be strictly be posterior, but common malposition is L malpost aorta. VSD may be present or absent, pulmonary stenosis may be present or absent. Right ventricular outflow tract obstruction is rare. systemic ventricular function is often impaired. So this is a situs solitus with dextrocardia. You can appreciate the subsified view showing the left ventricle is located on the right side and the right ventricle is located on the left side. So this is L ventricle because compared to this LV, the RV is located on the left side. You can appreciate the right atrium getting committed through the mitral valve into the left ventricle. Left atrium getting committed through the tricuspid valve, which is caudally located, to the right ventricle, which is more trabeculated. We have to understand one thing. The normal intraventricular septum is located in such a way that the right ventricle is always anterior to the intraventricular septum and to the right of the intraventricular septum. Left ventricle is always posterior and to the left. Left ventricle is marginally inferior and the right ventricle is marginally superior. The left ventricle actually forms the diaphragmatic surface of the heart predominantly. So if you look at the left ventricle, it is located to the left, it is located inferiorly, and it is located posteriorly. The right ventricle is located to the right, anterior, and superior. This configuration of the intraventricular septum is completely lost in corrective transposition. In corrective transposition, the septum is sort of sagittal. So you have the right ventricle on the left side and left ventricle on the right side, and the septum is sagittal. So it is quite difficult to image the corrective transposition in the conventional echocardiographic views very easily. One of the most helpful view will be from subsify. All the other views, the parasternal views, will be extremely challenging because intraventricular septum being sagittal, if you sweep the parasternal long axis view to the left side, you will be on the right ventricle. And if you sweep it to the right side, you will be on the left ventricle. And it is very difficult to focus on the septum. So this is a subsified modified view wherein you can see the tricuspid valve connecting to the right ventricle, the mitral valve connecting to the left ventricle, the smooth surfaced left ventricle, the rough surfaced right ventricle, and portions of the moderator band being clearly visible. So one of the rules of how to identify a left ventricle and the right ventricle should have coarse trabeculations. The right ventricle should have thick moderator band. Right ventricle should have a septophilic AV valve. So this AV valve is actually septophilic. It is trying to have some attachment towards the septum. This AV valve is far away. It's septophobic. It's not even coming closer to the AV valve, the intraventricular septum. That means it is septophobic. So this is septophilic. And this AV valve annulus is more apical. We are able to see that the left-sided AV valve annulus or the tricuspid valve annulus is far more apical, whereas the right-sided AV valve annulus or the mitral valve annulus is far more at a basal level. The tricuspid valve septal attachments can be quite extensive in corrective transposition. That some of the patients may have tricuspid valve chordae having too much of attachment towards the intraventricular septum, and when there is an ventricular septal defect, there can be a significant straddling of the tricuspid valve leaflets towards the other side of the septum as well. RV is always dilated in corrective transposition because systemic right ventricles never have a normal systolic contractility. The systemic right ventricle, in view of its loose trabeculated myocardium, in addition having a single coronary supply through only the right coronary artery, is often dysfunctional and very often gets dilated. Some degree of non-compaction that is seen in these right ventricles are actually the over-exaggeration of the trabeculations that are seen in the setting of a dilated right. We can appreciate the tricuspid valve always apically more attached and the mitral valve being basally attached. And in case if there is a doubt, you can zoom onto that AV valve annular area. You can appreciate the tricuspid valve is clearly apical and the mitral valve is clearly basal. When you look at the parasternal short axis view, you can appreciate the smooth walled left ventricle on the intraventricular septum on the LV side and the rough walled right ventricle on the intraventricular septum on the right ventricular side. This right ventricle is on the left side and the left ventricle is on the right side. So the dense trabeculations of the right ventricle or coarse trabeculations of the right ventricle, dilatation of the right ventricle, and impaired contractility are all part of the systemic right ventricle. Very often, as the age advances, because of the inherent right ventricular systolic dysfunction, there is often a marked dilatation of the left atrium, and this is a characteristic feature. A dilated left atrium and a dilated right ventricle will be seen as the child progressively becomes older and older. So coming to a 3D view, I wanted to show some anatomy on this. This is the tricuspid valve seen en face from the left atrium. You can appreciate the anterior tricuspid leaflet, the small septal tricuspid leaflet, and the posterior tricuspid leaflet. So these are the three leaflets joining to form the tricuspid valve orifice. You can appreciate the left atrial appendage. This pulmonary valve is actually committed to the left ventricle that is on the right side. Now, imagine this is the plane of the intraatrial septum. So this is the plane of the intraatrial septum. Whereas, now I'll try to freeze it. Let me try to see. Now, I'm going to draw the plane of the intraatrial septum. So this side is the left atrium and this side is the right atrium. Now, you look at the pulmonary valve. So this is the pulmonary valve. The pulmonary valve is actually wedged into the groove between the tricuspid valve on the left side and the mitral valve on the right side. I will draw an imaginary mitral valve here. So this is the mitral valve. So this red line is the plane of the intraatrial septum. Now I'm going to draw the interventricular septum. This is the plane of the interventricular septum. When you come into the ventricle, this is the left ventricle and this is the pulmonary artery. So this left ventricular blood will go into this pulmonary artery. So what is the difference here? There is a malalignment between the atrial septum, which is shown as the red line, and the ventricular septum, which is shown as the green line. Now, let us draw the conventional, I'll take a black color. The conventional atrioventricular node, what it is supposed to do. The AV node will get penetrated into the intraventricular septum in this location normally. Usual patients will have tricuspid valve here, septal tricuspid leaflet, coronary sinus, tendon of Todaro. This is the triangle of Thorn, AV node, and the penetrating AV nodal bundle will enter into the interventricular septum. But suppose, let us assume in a corrected transposition, I'll choose another color. If the posterior AV node decides to enter into this area, it will not be able to enter into the interventricular septum because interventricular septum is in another plane. The green plane is the interventricular septum. The pink will not be able to enter. So what happens? There is an anterior AV node that forms at the base of the right atrial appendage. Now this is the right atrial appendage. And this anterior AV node now courses to the anterior side of the pulmonary valve, and it reaches the interventricular septum here and then goes down. Is it clear? Suppose there is any doubt, again we'll clarify on this because this will tell what is the basis of the atrial septal and ventricular septal malalignment. Any questions from the participants on this area? If there are any questions, then I'll be able to understand what will be the difficulty in understanding. I just go back once again. This is a tricuspid valve on fast view. Now I will run this picture. I don't know whether. Oh, whatever I had drawn has gone. Okay. Now, anyhow, let me again try. This is the anterior tricuspid leaflet, septal tricuspid leaflet, and posterior tricuspid leaflet. This is the plane of the interatrial septum. This is the pulmonary valve. This is the plane of the interventricular septum. So this is the left atrium. This is the right atrium. In normal heart, this would have been the tricuspid valve, and this is the region of the coronary sinus, tendon of Todaro. The posterior AV node would have given the penetrating AV nodal bundle that would have gone into this place. In corrected transposition, this posterior AV node, if it tries to enter here, this is not the plane of the atrial septum, ventricular septum at all. Ventricular septum is malaligned. So this posterior AV node will not be able to enter into this interventricular septum at all. So in order to compensate for that, this right atrium, the base of the right atrial appendage, there will be an anterior AV node which will give a conduction tissue along the anterior wall of the pulmonary valve and enter into the interventricular septum, where this is the interventricular septum. This green color is the interventricular septum. So this anterior AV node will gain entry, whereas this posterior AV node will not gain an entry. So this anatomy is understood from this 3D view. The purple color is the atrial septal plane. The green color is the ventricular septal plane. In normal heart, the posterior AV node will directly enter, and in a normal heart, the atrial septal plane and the ventricular septal plane are in alignment with each other. Whereas since there is a malalignment between the atrial plane and the ventricular plane in patients with corrector transposition, the posterior AV node fails to enter. On the contrary, anterior AV node will enter into the interventricular tract. So in patients who are having, for some reason, corrected transposition with VSD with severe pulmonary stenosis, this AV node will easily be able to gain a connection. Let us assume that there is a patient who is having pulmonary atresia. That means there is no pulmonary outflow tract at all. In such a case, the amount of malalignment will be very little. So the posterior AV node itself sometimes will be able to, the posterior AV node itself will be able to enter, because the amount of malalignment becomes very negligible, because this angle, the angle between this and the atrial septum to ventricular septum, that malalignment narrows down progressively when there is a severe pulmonary atresia. I hope you are able to follow. Somebody send me a message in case if you are having any doubts. You can open the chat box. Okay, so there is, yes, in situs solitus with dextrocardia also the same situation. In situs solitus with dextrocardia, it's exactly the same sort of anatomy will be there. I'll come into it more and more as we advance further. So this is the 3D en-face view. Actually, this is not displayed correctly. You imagine that you are actually viewing it from here. See, I'll again use the pen now here. Normally, how we should try to display, this is the tricuspid valve. This is the atrial septum. This is the mitral valve. This is the wedged pulmonary outflow tract. And this is the unwedged anterior aorta. So this should be the surgical view when we are displaying on a 3D en-face view. But here, it has been actually been inverted. So this is the tricuspid valve, and this is the mitral valve, and this is the pulmonary outflow tract. That means basically we have not given the Z-plane rotation. We have not given the Z-plane rotation here. So this is actually called as anatomically inappropriate display. There is something, whenever we are displaying a subxiphoid view, conventionally we put the probe at the bottom and we display as if it's a V-shaped display. Similarly, an apical 4-chamber view also, we try to display in a V-shaped manner. The reason why it is displayed that way is it's called anatomically correct and attitudinally appropriate. Anatomically correct means whatever is superior, whatever is inferior is inferior. Whatever is to the left is left, whatever is to the right is right. So this is anatomically correct. And attitudinally appropriate. What does that mean? We don't try to show a human heart as if like holding it upside down. The chambers that are normally located at the bottom, on the top, on top, on the bottom. Here actually this is attitudinally inappropriate. The reason was, you can see the year, it was almost 12 years ago. We had not mastered that Z-plane rotations very well during those days. Actually, it would have been now technically very, very easier to rotate it, but this was one of the older displays. But what I wanted to show here, again, if I have to use the this is the plane of the atrial septum, and this is the plane of the ventricular septum. So the ventricular septum is in such a way that the mitral inflow and the pulmonary outflow are on the same side. Atrial septum is in such a way that the left atrium and right atrium are on either side. So this is what is called as the malalignment between the atrial septum and the ventricular septum. So this is the mitral valve. You can appreciate that the mitral valve and the pulmonary valve will be in fibrous continuity, and the pulmonary valve will completely be wedged inside the groove between the tricuspid and the mitral valve. So the pulmonary valve is actually wedged deeply. This is an en face view from the left ventricle. This is the smooth left ventricular septal surface. The mitral valve is opening into the left ventricle, and through the smooth septal surface left ventricular outflow tract, this is the pulmonary valve. So the pulmonary valve and the mitral valve are in complete fibrous continuity. When we sweep from an apical four-chamber view much more anteriorly, you can appreciate that the left and anterior aorta comes off from the right ventricle, and the right and posterior pulmonary artery comes off from the left ventricle. So this is LV giving off PA from a smooth-walled ventricle, and this is the rough-walled ventricle giving off the aorta anterior. A close-up view will show the mitral pulmonary fibrous continuity. Pulmonary valve is wedged into the mitral tricuspid orifice, and the right ventricle does not give off a great artery in a posterior plane. It gives off at a very, very anterior plane. When you look at the long axis view, parasternal long axis, this is the most challenging view. In parasternal long axis view, it's extremely difficult to get the interventricular septum properly profiled in a corrected transposition because septum is strictly sagittal. I explained it already. So you will never be able to get a similar view, something similar to a conventional parasternal long axis view in a patient who is having a corrected transposition at all. So this is the rough trabeculated right ventricle giving off the L post aorta, and on a rightward sweep, you will find that the pulmonary valve, this is the pulmonary valve, and now you sweep leftward, this is the aortic valve. So you have to move from left to right in order to get the pulmonary valve and the aortic valve, because both will be forcing parallel to each other. So both these are parallel. They both move from anterior to posterior. And so this is the aortic valve and this is the pulmonary valve. So this is the pulmonary, and on a leftward sweep, the aorta. You can appreciate this is the aorta now, and this is the pulmonary. I can freeze it and show. So this is the pulmonary valve, and as we move further, we are sweeping progressively towards the left, and now this is the aortic valve. So this is the aortic valve. You can appreciate the coronary coming off from the aorta, and this is the aortic valve. So this valve is. So you have to move from left to right in order to get the two great arteries. On a transesophageal echocardiogram, you can again appreciate the mitral pulmonary fibrous continuity. So this is the mitral pulmonary fibrous continuity, and the aorta is far away. The aorta is anterior and it is far away. So this is the tricuspid valve, and from the tricuspid valve, this is the long subaortic conus, and this is the aortic valve. So this is left atrium, tricuspid valve, right ventricle, subaortic conus, and aorta. The pulmonary artery is posterior. So again, this is to show the mitral pulmonary fibrous continuity. This is seen best on a 3D view when we are seeing from the ventricular side. So this is the tricuspid valve, the septal tricuspid leaflet, the anterior tricuspid leaflet, the posterior tricuspid leaflet. The septal tricuspid leaflet will be completely tethered towards this interventricular septum. And this is the subaortic long conus from where the aorta is now given off. So this is the aorta that comes off from the right ventricle, a long subaortic conus. Now let us assess the AV valve. The systemic AV valve is of more concern because these systemic AV valves are not only prone for a lot of anatomical abnormalities, but also a lot of functional abnormalities. We'll come to it. So this is the tricuspid valve. Tricuspid valve will have a septal leaflet and an anterior leaflet that will be visible when you are viewing from the apical four-chamber view. So the septal and the anterior tricuspid leaflet will form the tricuspid annulus. And always the tricuspid valve will have an annular attachment which is apical. So the membranous portion of the ventricular septum will be between the LV and the LA. In some patients, the tricuspid valve annulus can be far more displaced down, and that will be called as the Epsteinoid malformation of the left AV valve. Contrary to a conventional Epstein's valve on the tricuspid side, an Epsteinoid valve on the mitral side, on the left, in the setting of a corrector transposition, is not associated with same degrees of abnormalities of the right ventricle, abnormalities of the right ventricular function, abnormalities of the anterior tricuspid leaflets. So this is called as Epsteinoid malformation. So the few changes that can happen will be more of apical displacement, more tethering of the septal tricuspid leaflet. However, the varieties of abnormalities that are seen in the conventional Epstein's anomaly of the tricuspid valve will not occur in Epstein's anomaly of the left AV valve, because such a severe degrees of left-sided AV valve regurgitation will not be tolerated in the fetal life, and these patients may not survive. You can have varying types of abnormalities. Anterior tricuspid leaflet chordae ruptured, leading to a flail chordae. You can have significantly tethered chordae. I will come to it when I am talking about on the second session about the surgical management. This is complete tethering. So what is basically a tethering? Tethering is an increased attachment of the leaflets towards the ventricular wall so that the tricuspid valve leaflets are not able to coapt at their normal plane. What is the normal plane at which this should have coapted? This is the tricuspid valve. We should have had a coaptation like this. Here we can appreciate that there is a significant tether angle that has been created by the leaflets not able to go up to the plane of the annulus at all. So this tethering can be due to two reasons. It can be due to abnormal caudal attachment towards the left ventricle, or it can be due to a markedly dilated ventricle, thereby a normal attachment, but it is being pulled. So these two different types of tethering, the first one will be called as Carpentier type 3A dysmobility, which is something similar to what we see in rheumatic mitral stenosis. And this one is Carpentier type 3B dysmobility, which is what is normally seen in patients with something like dilated cardiomyopathy or ischemic cardiomyopathy. So the difference between these two, in both these conditions, the tricuspid valve is not able to reach the plane of the tricuspid annulus at all. Now I will try to go back again to the movie. So the two AV valve leaflets are not able to reach the plane of the AV valve annulus at all, creating a tether angle. And this tethering in this particular case is due to type 3A dysmobility, which means shorter chordae, which are preventing it from reaching the plane of the interventricular septum. If it is due to markedly dilated right ventricle, and that is what is preventing, then that is type 3B dysmobility. As the septal leaflet attachments get more and more, you can have more and more straddling. The tricuspid valve chordae can keep on getting attached progressively more and more towards the crest of the interventricular septum and sometimes even to the other side of the interventricular septum. So varying degrees of chordae, left AV valve straddling, and varying degrees of left AV valve override may be seen. Whenever there is override, that means the right ventricle is significantly hypoplastic. So this is, yeah, straddling. You can see the crest of the tricuspid valve chordae getting attached to the crest of the interventricular septum. And if you draw a line from So if you draw a line, we are almost 30% override. So this override is commonly due to hypoplasia of the right-sided ventricle. So this is, in this condition, if you carefully look at, there is some amount of tethering of the septal tricuspid leaflet, but towards the anterior sweep, you can appreciate that anterior tricuspid leaflet is having excessive mobility. So it is going above the plane of the annulus. So a combination of prolapse of the anterior tricuspid leaflet along with some amount of tethering of the septal tricuspid leaflet is the mechanism. So the analysis of tricuspid regurgitation should be concentrating on the different leaflets, just like mitral valve assessment in mitral regurgitation. What is the annular diameter? Is there an excessive mobility? And if there is an excessive mobility, are the leaflets still being held by the chordae, which means it is only prolapsing, or are the leaflets completely out of control of the chordae? That means it is flail. If there is a restricted mobility, it is due to shortened chordae, which means it is type 3A, or is it due to dilated ventricle that is resulting in lack of the leaflets from reaching the annular plane? That means type 3B. So the Carpentier's approach to mitral valve can be applied to tricuspid valve whenever the tricuspid valve is supporting the systemic circulation. A group of patients will not have any tricuspid regurgitation at all, and these patients will completely remain asymptomatic for a long period of life. Whereas some of the patients may have varying degrees of AV valve regurgitation. Now carefully, if you see the mechanism of the AV valve regurgitation, this is due to septal leaflet chordae prolapsing. You can appreciate here. See, the septal leaflet chordae is actually going beyond the plane of the annulus. So this is resulting in a posteriorly directed mitral regurgitation. So in some of the patients where there is a significant tethering of the tricuspid valve leaflets, there is much more severe degrees of regurgitation. And this is caused by severe tethering of both anterior and septal tricuspid leaflets. As a result of left AV valve regurgitation, there is marked dilatation of the left atrium. And this left atrial dilatation is an indirect indicator of the severity of the left AV valve regurgitation. Coming to the great artery relationship, L malpos dieta is the rule. You can appreciate the coronaries being given off from the L malpose aorta. Here, both the coronaries are actually given off from the right facing sinus. You can appreciate this is the right coronary artery which is turning to the right, and this is the left coronary artery which is coursing towards the left. So varying types of abnormalities of the coronary can be seen, sometimes single coronary, and we need to look at the greater the coronary artery pattern. Now coming to ventricular septal defect. Ventricular septal defect is very often located in the membranous septum, so which means it is often subpulmonic, but rarely it can be away from the membranous septum and more closer to the outflow tract, and this will be subaortic. So here you can appreciate the VSD is far more anterior than the membranous septum. It's not truly subpulmonic, it's almost going on to subaortic area. And in such cases, the subaortic conus will be smaller. It's also called a subarterial ventricular septal defect. In some of the patients, there can be a significant inlet extension. And the more and more the inlet extension, the more and more chances of straddling and override of the atrioventricular valves can be present. In this particular example, you can appreciate that the septal tricuspid leaflet is causing some degree of restriction of the ventricular septal defect. Whenever the AV valves are closed, there is also some degree of restriction of the ventricular septal defect caused by the leaflet tissue itself. Sometimes the VSD can be very restrictive, and progressively these restrictive VSDs can become smaller and smaller, and they may close off also. Causes of left AV valve, left LVOT obstruction. This is the left ventricle and this is the pulmonary valve. You can appreciate that there is a mitral valve here and there is an accessory mitral valve caudal tissue attached here. And this mitral valve accessory tissue is causing a subpulmonic narrowing. So here we can appreciate the same accessory AV valve tissue causing the left ventricular outflow tract obstruction, leading to moderate degrees of subpulmonary stenosis. Sometimes it can be due to very, very narrowed pulmonary annulus or doming pulmonary valve. So it can be pulmonary valvar or pulmonary annulus stenosis. Sometimes it can be due to discrete subpulmonic muscle bundles causing a subpulmonary muscle ridge, or sometimes it can be long muscular tunnels. So this is a long subpulmonary muscular tunnel. So there can be various reasons. Sometimes it can be, this is a thick muscular ridge, like a subpulmonic muscular ridge. In some of the patients, it can be due to the mitral valve chordae getting a firm attachment towards the left ventricular outflow tract. And this will result in this abnormal attachment of the mitral valve itself causing a severe subpulmonic stenosis. So this is the severe subpulmonic stenosis that has been created by the abnormal attachment of the mitral leaflet towards the interventricular septum. We should remember the mitral valve is not supposed to have any attachment towards the interventricular septum at all. So this is an abnormal mitral valve attachment to the left ventricular outflow tract in the region of the interventricular septum, and this is causing this abnormal left ventricular outflow tract obstruction. Sometimes there can be right ventricular outflow tract obstruction, very often caused by thick subaortic conal muscles. So this is a thick subaortic conal muscle that is below the aortic valve, causing a severe subaortic narrowing, and you can appreciate the significant subaortic narrowing. So this is the right ventricular outflow tract obstruction, where there is also some degree of left ventricular outflow tract obstruction. RV dysfunction can be seen at various points of time in the patients with corrective transposition. In general, as they get older and older, there is progressively more and more RV dysfunction. RV gets more trabeculated, more dilated. Some patients may have milder degrees of RV dysfunction. Some patients may have very severe degrees of RV dysfunction. This is very profoundly dysfunctional right ventricle And in these patients, tricuspid annulus gets dilated and there is a secondary tricuspid regurgitation, something similar to mitral regurgitation that is seen in dilated cardiomyopathy. So this is a significantly dysfunctional right ventricle, markedly dilated. Is the time going to be over? If it is so, then I will stop here.
Sir, I booked the slot up to 2 o'clock. Once you said like 1 to 1:30, like we have
Okay.
booked it for 1 to 2. I'm not sure whether it will get cut off or not. This is the first time. So probably you can continue if you want till the time, because it's 2 o'clock and it's still continuing, I believe.
Okay. Now,
But
what
I can see your screen now.
okay, I'll share the screen again. I will just a second. I will. Again, how to share the screen?
So right on the bottom, that like near that all the icons, no sir, the mute, start video. In that like there is a share screen option. Yeah, this comes.
Is it seen?
Yeah, so we're seeing the desktop.
Stop now. Share screen. It's written that you are viewing Anil
Yeah.
Singh's screen.
Oh, 1 second.
One second. Let me.
Okay, now you can share, sir. I've stopped. I think like Dr. Anil Singh's screen started coming in, so I've stopped that now. You can share it once again. Yeah, you're on, sir.
Okay, now with this particular like description so far, now let us see how to assess a patient for an anatomical repair of a corrective transposition. Now what we will be discussing will be how to assess the operability of a patient with corrective transposition with a VSD, how to decide about the rootability, adequacy. Let us go into step by step. What are the components? The morphological features of the VSD. Where is the VSD and how to close it? Pulmonary vascular resistance, how to assess the pulmonary vascular resistance? How to assess the ventricular systolic function? How to assess the tricuspid valve straddling and its function? Assessment of systemic and pulmonary veins. Atrial abnormality, if there is an aneurysmal left atrium due to significant left AV valve regurgitations or a juxtaposed atrial appendage. Coronary patterns and presence or absence of subpulmonic outflow tract obstruction, and is there an arch obstruction. So these are the components that we need to take into consideration in a patient when we are thinking about the operability in corrective transposition. First, coming to morphology of the VSD. Almost all the ventricular septal defects of corrective transposition will be conotruncal VSD. The commonest VSD location is in the perimembranous location with some amount of inlet extension, and it will always be below the pulmonary annulus. So it is perimembranous subpulmonic ventricular septal defect. Rarely, as I showed one example, it can be completely be subarterial and it's doubly committed. But both these are conotruncal VSDs. Isolated muscular VSDs are rare. So this is a apical four-chamber view. We are now viewing very posteriorly The right atrium committed to mitral valve to the left ventricle, left atrium committed to tricuspid valve to the right ventricle. We have not visualized the VSD. Sweep a little anterior, you are able to appreciate the ventricular septal defect, and below, just above the VSD, you are seeing the pulmonary valve also. So this subpulmonary location is the commonest site of ventricular septal defect in corrected transposition. So if we look at, again, I'll freeze it. So this is the tricuspid valve. This is anatomically appropriate display. So we are able to see the left atrium here. This is the right atrium. So this is like the surgeon's view. This is the plane of the atrial septum. And this is the plane of the ventricular septum. The commonest locations of the ventricular septal defect will be subpulmonic, conotruncal, and subpulmonic. Rare VSDs can be in this location subaortic. Common VSDs are subpulmonic. This is, we are viewing from the atrial surface, so you have to remember that the round that I have drawn is below the plane of the screen. So common VSD is subpulmonic with minimal inlet extension, and rare VSDs are totally in the outflow septum. So when we are looking at from the ventricular view, again I will choose so the common VSDs are in the location of subpulmonic. So this is the mitral valve, this is the tricuspid valve, this is the pulmonary valve, and the common VSDs will be in the region of subpulmonic location. Some of the VSDs can be subarterial, in which case subaortic conus is very small and the VSD is actually away from the tricuspid valve. So this is a subarterial VSD. You can see that the conus is very small. The pulmonary valve and the aortic valve. Aortic valve is coming off from the right ventricle, pulmonary valve is coming off from the left ventricle, and it is totally an outlet VSD. So this is the outlet ventricular septal defect. The flow from the right ventricle towards the left ventricle through the outlet subarterial ventricular septal defect. This is a rare type of VSD. In such cases, there will not be too much of subaortic conus at all, and there will be mitral and pulmonary valve will be almost in contact with each other. But this is a rarer type of VSD. So a typical perimembranous subpulmonic VSD is the commonest type of VSD. Subarterial VSD is a rarer type of VSD. Can there be additional VSDs? Can occur in less than 10% of the patients. Small muscular VSDs can be missed when there is severe pulmonary hypertension because there won't be any significant color turbulent jets between the two ventricles. But a large muscular VSD should not be missed. But what is the challenge? Large muscular VSDs are easily missed in corrected transposition. Why? Because already, as I explained, the plane of interventricular septum is completely sagittal to the plane of the body. It's in the sagittal plane. And so these VSDs are not easily recognized at all in the conventional views. The best view to recognize the VSD is subxiphoid view, and very often in a grown-up patient, it will be challenging. So there can be a total miss of a large ventricular septal defect, and it is one of the reasons in grown-up patients with corrected transposition, when they are going for anatomical repair, some of the institutions will routinely advocate cardiac catheterization and ventricular angiographies. More and more challenges will happen when there is a horizontal plane of the VSD, as in superior inferior ventricles. This is an example of a superior inferior ventricle. You can note here that the superior ventricle is the right ventricle. This is the aorta, and this is subaortic conus, and this is the right ventricle. The smoother left ventricle is in the diaphragmatic surface. And between the two, in this plane of the interventricular septum, it's again easy to miss a large ventricular septal defect. So we should understand that in certain patients, it will be very challenging to definitely exclude an additional muscular VSD in the setting of corrected transposition. So this is like a supero-inferior ventricles on a posterior sweep. I'll get it posteriorly. So there is a large subpulmonic ventricular septal defect. This is the mitral valve to pulmonary valve. It's exposing the large ventricular septal defect now. It's exposing the large ventricular septal defect, and additional VSDs can be missed very easily. Again, assessing additional ventricular septal defect in the setting of dextrocardia will be clinically extremely challenging. And so these are patients where we should remember that we cannot with echocardiography completely rule out an additional muscular VSD. Another thing that we have to see in the VSDs are how much is the inlet extension, and is the inlet extension quite extensive. If there are too extensive inlet extension, almost to the point that in certain plane, I'll freeze the plane, it's extremely large inlet extension. In such cases, some of the decisions may be to go in for a univentricular repair. This is a much more extensive inlet extension and a very large inlet extension that in some of these cases, it will be better to go for a univentricular strategy. Now, corrected transposition in the setting of DORV. In corrected transposition with DORV, the VSD is always subpulmonary and LV can be routed towards the pulmonary valve. It's extremely uncommon to have corrected transposition with DORV and a non-routable VSD. I'll show some examples now. So this is a corrected transposition with a DORV. This is the right atrium, mitral valve to left ventricle. The pulmonary valve is completely arising from this right ventricle, but this VSD can be routed towards this pulmonary valve. So this is a corrected transposition with a double outlet right ventricle, where ventricular tunneling will be done towards the pulmonary valve and committing this as the systemic AV valve and then performing an arterial switch. When we go very, very anterior in the same patients, this is the right ventricle giving off the aorta and the VSD is not seen. So I'll go back. So in this plane, you will find that the VSD is located more in a posterior plane, and we will not be able to route this left ventricle towards the far more anterior aorta, and we may have to route this left ventricle towards this pulmonary valve. So when we, from an anterior sweep, as we are moving posteriorly, I'll freeze it again. This is right ventricle giving off the aorta, and now we are progressively moving posteriorly. We can appreciate that the pulmonary valve is going to appear. This is the pulmonary valve. So this left ventricle has to be routed towards this pulmonary valve. On a sagittal view, you can appreciate the plane of the interventricular septum will not be seen at all, because the interventricular septum is also sagittal. So a parasternal view is not going to be showing. However, you will appreciate the two parallel great arteries. The anterior great artery is the aorta and the posterior great artery is the pulmonary artery. Both are arising from the systemic right ventricle. So VSDs are always conotruncal, located in subpulmonary location. Sometimes it will be conotruncal and subarterial. Additional VSDs are easy to be missed, especially in supra-inferior VSDs, supra-inferior ventricles and in the setting of dextrocardia. In corrected transposition with DORB, VSD is almost always routable to the pulmonary arteries. Assessing pulmonary vascular resistance. Quite commonly, patients with corrected transposition may present to you at a slightly advanced age. So if you are using the conventional wisdom of operability in VSD, like saturation, more than 95-96% operable, hyperkinetic precardium in the absence of tricuspid regurgitation, large heart with hyperkinetic ventricles in the absence of tricuspid regurgitation, and if there is a plethora on the chest X-ray, these are good enough. But the fallacies are, normally we will talk about left ventricular volume overload in the presence of a VSD. Here it is right ventricular volume overload. We need to understand dilatation of a systemic right ventricle cannot be taken as an indicator of the quantity of the shunt. You can have the right ventricle being dilated just by virtue of right ventricular systolic dysfunction and not due to higher volume overload. Echocardiographic planes of the interventricular septum may also alter the assessment of systemic ventricular volume overload. Quite often, you will find in the presence of corrected transposition, one or the second ventricle can look hypoplastic in an apical view or in a subsified view. But if you keep tilting the planes, you may find that the other ventricle is adequate. So since the echocardiographic plane of the interventricular septum is far altered, a conventional assessment of systemic ventricular volume overload is difficult in corrected transposition. ECG is totally useless because ECG does not show a septal Q in B6 at all. On the contrary, there are septal Qs in B1. So there are no ECG criteria. So if there is a doubt, you can adopt catheterization. Cath will give QP, QS, PVR, SVR calculations. We can assess responsiveness to oxygen. We can rule out additional ventricular septal defect, which I already told is very difficult to diagnose. The bonus advantages will be, we can shoot what is the coronary status, which will help in performing a double switch operation. We can shoot for abnormal LSVC to coronary sinus, which will help in planning the Senning's repair. Assessment of tricuspid valve. Tricuspid valve can be straddling, can be overriding. Already I mentioned overriding means hypoplasia of the right ventricle. So we need to think that any patient with an overriding tricuspid valve, whether the right ventricle is adequate at all. Then there is functional tricuspid regurgitation. What is functional tricuspid regurgitation? This is due to dilatation of the right ventricle, which is causing a tethering of the tricuspid valve leaflets due to the chordae being held by the dilated right ventricle. There can be anatomical tricuspid regurgitation caused by true septal tricuspid leaflets tethering to interventricular septum, where this is not due to right ventricular dilatation. So this is more like rheumatic mitral stenosis, where there is a shortened tricuspid leaflet chordae, which is holding it on to the interventricular septum. There can be gross epsteinoid malformations or prolapsing leaflets. So this is a tricuspid valve leaflet straddling. I'll freeze it. So now we can appreciate this tricuspid valve has got chordae which are attached towards the left ventricular side of the interventricular septum. This is the interventricular septum and there are attachment to the left ventricular side. So imagine that we have to close this ventricular septal defect. The closure is not in this plane now. The closure has to be in this plane. So identifying this straddling is extremely important. Up to grade 2 straddling of the tricuspid valve is acceptable for a VSD closure, but also look for override. If there is an override of significance, that means there is a hypoplasia of the right ventricle. So then you look at which of the leaflets are tethered. You can appreciate here, the septal tricuspid leaflet is significantly tethered. I will show it now. The tricuspid valve has closed down. This is the septal tricuspid leaflet. Ideally, how the septal tricuspid leaflet should have come. It should have been in this plane. But here it is in this plane. So the point of coaptation, now I will go away. So what should have been at this level is now at this level. So this is due to tethering of the septal tricuspid leaflet to the interventricular septum, significant tethering. And that is the reason for the tricuspid regurgitation. You are able to find out a very significant tricuspid regurgitation caused by the tether that was explained in the previous slide. Sometimes it can be due to excessive prolapse of the leaflets. This is an anterior tricuspid leaflet prolapse, very clearly visible. You can appreciate. The anterior tricuspid leaflet is significantly prolapsing. This is an epsteinoid malformation. You can appreciate the separation between the mitral attachment and the tricuspid attachment. Significant epsteinoid malformation. There is also an element of anterior tricuspid leaflet prolapse. Whenever there is a very severe tricuspid regurgitation, the flows through the interventricular septal defect may not be very clearly visible because this is an extremely low pressure chamber. So a large amount of shunt will be directed from the right ventricle towards the left atrium rather than through the ventricular septal defect. So how to assess a tricuspid valve? Straddling. Up to grade 2 straddling is acceptable. Minimal override is acceptable. Functional tricuspid regurgitation with type 3B dysmobility due to dilated right ventricle is acceptable. In all these conditions, tricuspid regurgitation will disappear once you do the double switch operation. If it is due to tethering of the septal tricuspid leaflet with type 3A dysmobility, shortened septal tricuspid leaflet, shortened septal tricuspid leaflet chord A, or if it is due to gross epsteinoid malformation, tricuspid regurgitation will persist after the surgery. In this particular patients, it may be better to go for a tricuspid replacement. Markedly prolapsing leaflets also, unlike in mitral valve, where mitral valve prolapse will have excellent results, in tricuspid valve prolapse, the results are so much unrewarding that people who are experts in managing left AV valves from systemic right ventricles have commented it is better to go for tricuspid valve replacements in these situations because chances of reoperations, if you try to retain these tricuspid valves in the presence of a double switch or an anatomical repair, is going to be extremely high. These patients will end up in repeated tricuspid valve reinterventions. About ventricular systolic function assessment. The issues are conventional left ventricular assessment does not work well with systemic right ventricle. The volumes are different, the shape is different. When the two ventricles function in unison in the presence of large VSD, the combined ventricular volumes can be factored. Coexistent tricuspid regurgitation may mask a poor ventricular function. There can be a very poor ventricular function, but due to severe tricuspid regurgitation, the RV may look as if it is contracting well. Abnormal echo windows that are present in these patients may reduce our ability to study the ventricles. There is no clear-cut data on speckles, tracking, strain in systemic right ventricles. We can also try to get some MRI numbers, but they are all not validated. The other anomalies that we should try to look for before operating on patients with anatomical repair. Systemic and pulmonary veins needs to be assessed very carefully because there is a sending component of a double switch operation. So we need to know how are the systemic veins, especially LSVC draining to coronary sinus. Atrial abnormalities should be understood, juxtaposed atrial appendages, as well as giant left atrium due to severe tricuspid regurgitation. We need to understand it clearly so that ascending can be planned better. Look for aortic arch abnormalities. Look for subpulmonary obstruction which is functional or resectable. Sometimes if the subpulmonary obstruction is completely functional due to protruding tricuspid valve chordae through the VSD into the left ventricular outflow tract, or protruding thinned out membranous septum into the left ventricular outflow tract, such patients may completely open out after you do the double switch operation. So in such cases, if the pulmonary annulus is of adequate size, a double switch can be performed. Coronaries is important obviously in a double switch because we have to incorporate a coronary transfer. So this is an example of a single coronary artery. You can appreciate the coronary artery. All the coronaries are arising from a single button. Now, one of the advantage, even if it is a single coronary, double switch operations are performed at an older age, and so it gives far more flexibility to perform a coronary transfer in a grown-up patient far more easily than a newborn. So, whenever you are confronted with a patient with a corrected transposition, some of the features that you need to look at are the morphological features of the VSD. Is it the conventional subpulmonic conotruncal VSD, or is it anterior subaortic subarterial VSD? Assessment of pulmonary vascular resistance, we need to understand that ECGs will not help. Dilatation of systemic right ventricle alone cannot be taken as an indicator. Right ventricle may get dilated just because of RV dysfunction rather than due to large volume overload. And so whenever there is a doubt, catheterization can be performed, which can also exclude additional VSDs. We have to understand that ventricular systolic function assessment is going to be far more challenging. Assessment of tricuspid valve, whether it is straddling, how much is its function, the mechanism of the tricuspid valve regurgitation, assessing the systemic and pulmonary veins, assessing the atria, coronary pattern, resectable forms of subpulmonic obstruction, which you can still perform a double switch operation, and associated arch obstruction. These are the parameters that you need to take into consideration. Thank you very much. Now, if there are any, still now it was audible, no? Hello?
Yes, it was quite audible, sir.
Okay. So,
any of the other participants can share their experience.
yeah.
So they're chatting to you. Right.
Yeah, I have opened out. The thing is, basically this was more like an experiment by Satya created it for some other purpose, and I tried to use it for our department. Okay, tethering versus functional TR, any quantitative parameters. Yeah, basically, tethering is the feature of reduced mobility of the leaflets. Whenever a leaflet is able to come to the annular location, that is the normal mobility. A tethered leaflet means it is not able to come to the level of the annulus. So the leaflet cannot come up, so it is being held back by the ventricle. There can be two reasons for this tether. One is an abnormal shortened chordae, an abnormal shortened leaflet, and an abnormal proximate attachment to the interventricular septum, in which case the leaflets will not be permitted to come. So this is anatomical tethering. So if there is an anatomical tethering, that ventricle need not be very dilated. Whereas functional tethering means ventricle is hugely dilated. A typical example of a functional tethering is ischemic cardiomyopathy. You have a left ventricle, you have a lateral wall ischemia, the anterolateral papillary muscle gets displaced down towards the apex. It creates a long gap between the base of the anterolateral papillary muscle to the anterolateral commissure. So this chordae is elongated a lot. The distance between the attachment of the anterolateral papillary muscle to the mitral annulus is elongated. So this leaflet cannot come to its normal closure point because it is being pulled down by that hugely dilated left ventricle. A similar thing occurs in right ventricle in corrector transposition. So we can find that basically the leaflet is not able to reach the level of annulus. So that means it is tethered. That means it is restricted mobility. So it will be named as Carpentier type 3. Look at the ventricle. Is the ventricle large and dilated and is it dysfunctional? Then you put it as 3B. If the abnormal attachments are the reason with ventricle is not too much dilated, then it is 3A. The reason why we need to differentiate between the two, the moment you change over from, if it is a type 3B dysmobility with an RV systolic dysfunction, the moment you commit the LV into the systemic circulation, RV now has to pump against a low resistance pulmonary vascular resistance. So this dysfunctional right ventricle will immediately become normal in size. Whereas if it is an abnormal anatomical tether, then in such a case, we will not be able to get a relief just by switching the ventricles. So this is the reason why people will say, if there is too much of septal tricuspid leaflet attachments that are preventing its mobility towards the annular plane, such cases are aggressively replaced. Tricuspid valve replacement is done. Now there is another question Anil has asked. Corrected transposition with a moderate deviceable ASD and mild to moderate tricuspid regurgitation, whether there is any role of ASD device closure. Now, I'll tell about the issues of, like first I'll try to move into a different area. Let's talk about a patient who is having a left ventricular dilated cardiomyopathy with mild to moderate LV systolic dysfunction, who is having an atrial septal defect. So what happens? Because of the LV systolic dysfunction and a secondary diastolic dysfunction due to elevation of the left ventricular end diastolic pressure, these patients tend to have a very large left right shunt. So if the left ventricular cardiomyopathy is by and large controllable with medications that includes beta blockers, AC inhibitors, adding an ASD device to control the left right shunt and reduce the left right shunt will make the patients marginally become better. But you should not take up these patients at the most advanced stage where the left atrial pressure is terribly high, where they will not be able to tolerate an ASD closure and they will develop a post-procedural pulmonary edema, in which case you may have to fenestrate. Now coming to corrected transposition, it's almost a situation is the same. You are having a systemic right ventricle. This systemic right ventricle is now having a large dilated right ventricle with an elevated right ventricular end diastolic pressure, and so it is going to be resulting in significant left right shunt through a secondum ASD. The closing that atrial septal defect will definitely cut down the left ventricular, will cut down the large left right shunt and the volume overload of the heart. But the problem that we are creating, we are taking away the volume overload of the right sided left ventricle. So this results in far more septal shift of the intraventricular septum towards the left ventricle, and this results in more rapid deterioration of the right ventricular systolic contractility. So let us talk about, if you are having a corrected transposition with mild to moderate levels of RV dysfunction and mild to moderate levels of tricuspid regurgitation, who also is having an ASD, even surgically, if you try to go in and close those ASDs, these patients deteriorate a lot due to far more rapid deterioration of the right ventricular systolic contractility due to septal shifts. So then if you ask what is the solution, it's also equally challenging. Very often these patients are a little bit advanced in their age. If at all these patients can be retrained by performing a pulmonary artery banding, train the left ventricle, make the left ventricle again capable of pumping against the systemic vascular resistance, and then perform a double switch operation with the tricuspid valve repair and an ASD closure, that may be more idealistic option. Having said that, I don't have a personal patient whom we have adopted this strategy. In patients where we have either surgically tried to close ASD in a corrected transposition with mild to moderate RV dysfunction or mild to moderate tricuspid regurgitation, as well as where we tried to device close these patients over a period of 5 to 10 years, they had deteriorated their right ventricular systolic contractility far more rapidly, and they became more sick at the end of 5 to 10 years. This is applicable both to simple ASD closure surgically and simple device closure of ASD alone, leaving behind the systemic right ventricle. It cannot be equated to a dilated cardiomyopathy with systemic left ventricle because of the alteration in the interventricular septal shape changes that results due to taking away of the LV volume. LV adequacy in corrected transposition with intact ventricular septal defect. Not very clear anatomical criteria, just like in the question is how to decide about the LV adequacy in corrected transposition in intact ventricular septum after you do a pulmonary artery banding. Now, in a patient who is having a simple detransposition of great artery with a regressed left ventricle, there are various criteria that has been described as left ventricular free wall thickness, left ventricular mass to volume ratio, whereas in corrected transposition, there are no such guidelines. Very often, these patients will have a pulmonary artery banding initially with a pressure control so that you increase the left ventricular pressure at least to two-thirds, if not nearly to systemic level, and then observe them. At the end of about, unlike a rapid two-stage arterial switch operation where you do the PA, pulmonary artery banding, and within a matter of 7 to 14 days convert them into a arterial switch operation. Double switch operations take long periods of time, 6 months to 1 year. You allow the patients to get fully trained. These are often relatively older patients, and these patients will get a repeat cardiac catheterization to assess the left ventricular systolic pressure. And once they are almost 75% of systemic pressures, then you can go ahead. Every patient with corrected, there is a question. I don't know whether you are also seeing the questions or only I will be able to see the question. There is a question about corrected transposition of great artery with VSD and pulmonary stenosis. Is there a risk of complete heart block while crossing the left ventricular outflow time? Every patient with corrected transposition with pulmonary valve, when we are crossing, this pulmonary annulus has got its entire anterior part of the annulus, the elongated conduction bundle is crossing through. And so, every patient with corrected transposition is at a risk. A corrected transposition with a VSD with pulmonary stenosis is also at a risk. The only patients who may not have an anterior communication will be corrected transposition VSD with pulmonary atresia. In such cases, anyhow, you will not be able to cross. So, always be very cautious whenever you are catheterizing a patient with corrected transposition. When you are crossing the pulmonary valve, keep watching the atrioventricular nodal conduction by looking at the PR interval. And even if there is 1 or 2 P waves that are getting missed, withdraw back the catheter and do the same thing again in a far more gentle manner. functional pulmonary outflow tract obstruction, there are various reasons. A thinned out membranous septum can bow towards the left ventricular outflow tract due to high systemic pressure and low left ventricular pressures. It can be due to a VSD with septal tricuspid chordae adherent to the VSD margins. As the right ventricle contracts, the high RV pressure pushes the septal tricuspid leaflet towards the pulmonary outflow tract. So it can either be due to a thin membranous septum bulging, or it can be due to a septal tricuspid leaflet which prolapses through the VSD and causes a ventricular outflow tract obstruction. It is normally said that in situs inversus dextrocardia with corrected transposition, where the anatomy is IDD, in a large majority of the patient, the posterior AV node still retains its anatomical fibrous continuity. The anterior AV node is the dominant AV node in the setting of situs solidus. But in situs inversus dextrocardia, many observers have noted that commonly the posterior AV node is still able to penetrate, and so they are little at a lesser risk for developing complete heart failure. In corrected transposition, the larger and larger the pulmonary annulus, the more and more the chances of AV nodal injury. The hugely dilated pulmonary outflow tract will have enormously stretched anterior connecting bundle, and they are more prone for AV nodal degeneration over a period of time. I am not aware about transcatheter AV valve repair in corrected transposition. Corrected transposition, restrictive VSD, PS. See, as I mentioned, corrected transposition with ventricular receptor, a pure corrected transposition with the absence of VSD and an absence of pulmonary stenosis, no issues at all. A corrected transposition with a large ventricular septal defect, these patients tend to get into heart failure after 6 to 8 weeks, that you may have to think about performing a surgery to reduce the pulmonary blood flow. If you are thinking about an anatomical repair, then it should be pulmonary artery banding in the earlier period, followed by double switch operation, or directly also some people can go into double switch operation if they are very comfortable to operate at 6 to 8 weeks of age. Whenever there is a corrected transposition with a VSD and the pulmonary stenosis, the shunt is substantially reduced. So this becomes what is called as a balanced circulation. Balanced circulation means the QP and QS are almost the same. So there is not much of volume overload of the chambers. When there is not much of volume overload of the chambers, both the ventricles tend to function comfortably well. Since the left ventricular pressure is elevated due to pulmonary stenosis, the septum is optimally pushed towards the right ventricle, thereby retaining the normal shape of a right ventricle. And so this tricuspid valve tends to get preserved for a long period of time. So in general, the dictum is the patient with corrected transposition VSD pulmonary stenosis who is not showing significant volume overload at all, they will keep on retaining their ventricular systolic contractility for many, many, many years of life. So these patients can be permanently left on medical management unless they have severe desaturation, which means the pulmonary stenosis is overwhelming, in which case you may have to choose a surgical strategy. Or if the pulmonary stenosis is very mild, that they present with marked heart failure, then again you may have to go for a surgical strategy. In the former route, corrected transposition with VSD and very severe pulmonary stenosis with severe cyanosis, extreme hypoxia, the options are, number one, Senning plus Rastelli, which is a very complex surgery, versus bidirectional Glenn and Fontan, which is a relatively simpler surgery. Large volume operators have found that both these options will have sort of similar long-term outcome. So a good number of centers will opt for corrector transposition, large VSD, severe PS with severe cyanosis towards Fontan pathway also. The second, corrector transposition with large VSD with very mild PS and significant pulmonary, increased pulmonary blood flow causing heart failure. In these patients, the pulmonary outflow tract obstruction mechanism has to be assessed. And if it is something simple that you can correct, for example, if it is like just bowing out of the interventricular membranous septum or septal tricuspid leaflet, which is causing the subpulmonic PS, or due to muscle bundles that you can easily resect out, in those cases, do the left ventricular outflow tract repair along with a double switch operation. If such a thing cannot be performed at all, then do a pulmonary artery banding and wait for the child to grow older and older. Most of the patients with corrected transposition will fortunately fall into the balanced group, wherein they will have a VSD, they will have a decent amount of pulmonary stenosis that the ventricles will not be volume overloaded, and this will preserve the ventricular function for innumerable number of years without any issues. So thanks to all of you. Hope we'll meet sometime again. Actually, there is another talk tomorrow at 3 to 5 o'clock on some other different talks. What we will do is this time, I think the total number of people whom we could inform were less. So probably tomorrow 3 o'clock, you also try to inform people. I'm sure Satya Sundar will share with you the password, the meeting numbers and all. And we will talk about some other couple of topics. There is something here called as Doctor Strange and Galaxy J4. Who are they? And one Vivo 1606 is also there. Some names I don't see. Okay, Strange is Bhushan. Fine. Vivo is whom? Thank you, sir. I'm seeing. Vivo is Santosh. Okay. Okay. Stay, all of you, stay safe and read well. Take this opportunity to read well. Thanks, Satya, for your time.
Thank you so much, sir.